James, we're going to skip the niceties today and the intros and everything because we need to get right into it. It's time to overreact.
Oh, already? Okay, let's do it.
Preseason, Islanders lose already. We're going to get to that in a little bit. A lot of the same tropes and typical Islander things. The power play is not good. This issue, that issue. There was a part of me that did love seeing it again. But it did kind of break my heart that we just picked up where we left off at the end of last season. But, ooh, baby, it's just I don't know. I'm getting revved up. I think I'm listening to more hockey stuff. I'm reading more again. What about you? I mean, I don't. You really just had August off, but you picked right back up with it.
Yeah,
in September. So you're a well-oiled machine at this point.
yeah, I'm in the thick of it. I am. The wheels are churning. I think I wrote 3 or 4 articles in one day yesterday. Today was a bit of a slower day. Team was off yesterday, so but yeah, I'm in the thick of it, and I'm ready and I'm roaring to go. So you're already hitting the panic button, is what you're saying after a preseason game?
I'm not. It's not. It's mixed. It's a mixed bag of emotions. It seems like on Twitter. I'm not there yet. I had this. I have notes later. Let's talk about the preseason, the games, because there's a game happening right now, which is not televised. Best that I know.
Streamed though. It is on stream.
He's on stream. I checked MSG Plus, formerly MSG Go.
I think it's on the website directly. They've been doing that. It's on the website directly. Yeah, I have it up right now. So you could watch it as we're doing this if you like.
Well, we know we don't get distracted ever, so that sounds like a good idea. Yeah, that's a joke. But maybe I will in a little bit as we get maybe closer to that segment. But let's start a couple days ago because we do this once a week. We had to catch up a little bit. There was an interesting article from Andrew Gross about Barzal with some quotes about a potential wingmate, we'll call it, in Pierre Engbal. And he talked about his speed and, coming from Barzal, I think it really says something. And that was a common comment from around Islanders country. Given what we know about how good that second line was, Engbal, Nelson, Palmieri, do you think that's even possible? Would Lambert break that up? Could Lee get on that line? It kind of forces Wahlstrom further down the lineup. It really does make your top 6 quite heavy as far as it can be for the Islanders anyway. What do you think about that? I think later in the preseason, we may actually see 2 or 3 options for real on that wing. It's probably too early. Everyone's getting a turn because they're splitting up rosters and things like that. So I'm not taking anything too seriously. But what do you think about a rearranged top 6 that would include Engbal on that top line?
Listen, I think right now, look, the obvious thing that's going on is this is the time to experiment, right? You don't want to do it in game 1. You want to do it in the preseason. So you want to figure out, who has some chemistry a little bit from the get-go and who absolutely just doesn't click, right? So I don't even think they've tried. I could be wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure they haven't even tried Engbal with Barzal in a preseason game yet. Maybe that's coming. But in the first 2 preseason games, they stuck Barzal with they've had Horvat with Barzal primarily, right? It's been Horvat at center, Barzal at the right wing.
And we're going to talk about that in a second. So I just want to talk about that opposite wing right now.
Yeah, but on the opposite wing in game 1 was Arnaud Durando, and right now, as we're recording this, it's Simon Holmstrom. So that's 2 different ends of the spectrum for me, right? Durando, they just scored, and it was Simon Holmstrom.
Off of what?
From Barzal.
Oh no. Yeah, so this is it. This is our time to overreact, and that's exactly. So this is very funny. This is why I did want to talk about that, and why I started the show that way, because you just immediately I think the emotional reaction, that immediate emotional reaction is, ah, shit, they're gonna try Holmstrom up there. And
Um,
that's just because he scored a goal, that doesn't mean anything. He just scored
right.
a goal. It may it, you know, I'd put it more on, wow, Barzal probably had a really great pass. What a setup. Not
Yeah,
who scored it.
actually, now that I'm looking at it, I think it was Barzell with the deflection, and Holmstrom was the screen. Um, Looked like a shot from the point that just caught Barzell and bounced over the goaltender. But regardless, um, two different ends of the spectrum for me with Durando and Holmstrom. Right, Durando is a speed demon. Like he's really fast, and I think there actually is some chemistry there with Barzell and Durando. I don't really know what his ceiling is. I don't know that the organization knew that they had what they do in Durando. Um, it was nice to see him score the other night. He did
Is
score
there
in
room
in
for
in
him on
the
the roster though?
I think there is. I think there absolutely is. Parise doesn't come back. Wallstrom is a question mark. I think he's going to stick on that third line to start. I think actually Anders Lee's going to be there too. I saw that earlier today, but we'll see how that works. But I think there's a spot to be won. I don't think it's a given that Holmstrom gets this last spot in the forward group. Um,
Oh,
so
absolutely, absolutely not. For some
right,
reason, he was on the roster and Durando wasn't. Maybe they were afraid of waiving
yeah,
Holmstrom. I don't know what the temperature is on waiving folks heading into this season, given how tight the salary cap is. So there may be a lot of players kind of going on the waiver wire as they get close to having to get the cap under
yeah,
control. The Islanders really only have a half million right now to clear to get their roster in shape. Best I know, maybe a hair under half a million.
yeah,
Best I'm remembering. Um, and they're still really high up there as far as teams that need to clear cap. And then there's still a whole lot, almost half the league needs to do that. So
yeah,
I,
100%.
I like the speed. Talking about Engvall, to your point about Durando, I like the speed. I think it's interesting, and he was
Right. So and
hungry,
that's
dude.
and that's the
He was
thing.
hungry.
Right. So Durando brings the speed. They're changing the goal now. It's credited to Holmstrom from Barzell. We'll see what happens. But so that's the element with Durando, right? He brings the speed. He's got playmaking ability. He scored a goal the other night. We'll see how much he can possibly put the puck in the back of the net. Maybe they don't necessarily need that because it does look like Barzell is shooting a lot more. I think he's just scored his fourth goal, right? Or third or fourth goal in two preseason games or something like that. Barzell's playing well in the preseason. Um, Now the Simone Holmstrom on the other hand, he's not a burner, right? He's not the fastest skater, but they did make a pretty heavy emphasis on the fact that he does everything else pretty well outside of the offensive zone, right? Not the fastest skater, not the most not going to score 30 goals, but everything else is really good, right? He's pretty defensively sound, and he has some playmaking ability. And then every once in a while, he remember that shot that we saw last year from him that we were like, "Oh, wow, like are we going to get more of that from this guy?" Well, apparently he's having a strong preseason as well. So, point being, there are a lot of different players that the Islanders have right now. And this is a good problem to have, in my opinion, with from what I'm hearing and seeing out of the Islanders camp. There's a lot of competition to win a roster spot. Simone Holmstrom's playing really well. Ruslan Iskakov is playing really well. Durando's playing really well. William DeFore is playing really well. These are all different types of players, though, right? You might even be able to group together DeFore and Holmstrom as heavier guys, and then Durando and Iskakov as smaller, faster guys, right? It's just a matter of who clicks with the duo of Horvat and Barzell, and is it going
I
to
think
be the
it's right.
speed, or is it going to be the guy who maybe has some better hands, someone who can distribute the puck well to Horvat when it's not on Barzell's stick. It looks like Barzell's shooting more. Maybe he needs someone to pass the puck to him. So there's what is today, the second preseason game for them, right? They're going to need probably 2 more games at least to figure out, okay, what's really clicking for Barzal, because we need to figure out what's going to give us the best top line. So this is a long-winded way of saying, and going back to your point with Pierre Engbal, right? Eventually they're going to try that, but I think that might be a last resort thing for them because of
Well,
how good Nelson and Palmieri played with him. Now, Palmieri also hasn't played in the preseason or in training camp
so
yet.
that
We
was
could
my
talk about
next.
that later.
I mean,
But
that's the next thing, and so I think that plays into this a little bit as far as roster spots, who's available.
correct.
They may. I mean, they can only carry 23 players, and they'll likely need a seventh defenseman.
Right.
Best we can tell, Ross Johnson will be around. As a, let's call him the 13th forward, just for argument's sake. There's still spot 12, which is Parise's spot. And if Palmieri's on the IR to start the season, that's another spot and a lot of cap space. That's less relevant because the Islanders aren't really going to do much with that. The players filling that role for Parise are in that price range around 750, 775, whatever the minimum is, the league min is. And this is without Kuhlman being sent down.
Right.
Chances are. And then Gauthier is another option. I've heard Bubkiss about him. There's been absolutely no chatter. I've seen nothing. And I know I'm trying to pay as close attention as I can, but even in my minimal viewing, I haven't seen anything on him talking about him positively or negatively, which I don't know. I don't know if that's a good sign or not, or a bad sign. So it's possible that those two players are buried in Bridgeport. So that does
Right.
open up a space for Holmstrom to be around and a Durando or something to fill that out. And they may need to. And if I'm really thinking about it, and this isn't in the notes, I didn't think about it until right now. If Palmieri's not around, I wonder that gives a spot to Wallstrom to move him up the lineup a little bit. I
Sure.
don't know that line is my favorite thing in the world, but I'm willing to give it a shot. It may also give an opportunity to Dufour. He's a righty. Am I mistaken on that?
Wallstrom, yeah, no, he's a righty.
No, Dufour.
Oh, Dufour is also a righty, yes.
And he plays the right wing. Lee Pajot Dufour, again, thinking about specific players, may also work there. And I think we're forgetting in that bottom six, and I think this is what complicates things, is Lee Pajot Fashing is something, right? Fashing's on the roster. He's not
Yeah.
going anywhere. So I think
Yeah.
there's some questions there with that fourth line and what may happen, because we keep kind of beating around this. I don't know how to not talk about it, and it's kind of annoying. There's so many unknowns. Parise not being in the lineup or on the roster doesn't really make a lick of difference. It was going to be a problem with or without him.
Okay.
Right? He makes a difference on the roster. Let's say that. And Barzal even said as much. I think even trying to in a video, he was making a plea to Parise to come back, but which
Yeah,
I
I
thought was
saw
very
that.
funny. That was some time ago, I think, when they were doing introductory interviews for camp, but entrance interviews, whatever. There's still a huge logjam. So I don't know how many actual roster spots there are of the 23. You have 7 of them locked up. You have with defense, you have 2 with goalies. You have the core players, but in theory, Wallstrom is taking that top line. You have a third line. You have the whole roster is there. I almost don't know. Are Durando and Holmstrom essentially fighting for one spot as a
That
13th or 14th forward? I don't think
yeah.
they're on their everyday
Well,
roster, unless Palmieri's out, in which case I don't think either of those players is the answer. I actually think it's Dufour. But
yeah. So I think that's correct, right? So right now the roster's set at 24 players. That includes Carson Kuhlman on the roster, Julian Gauthier. Um, who else is here?
Holmstrom not on that roster. Durando
Holmstrom
not on the
not
roster.
right. Holmstrom, Durando not on that roster. So, for argument's sake, they trim the roster by sending Kuhlman down, and Kyle Palmieri goes on injured reserve to start the season. That's two spots that are available. So actually, no, I'm lying. That's one spot that's available because Carson Kuhlman makes it
Right.
23 out of 23 after he's
That's
demoted to the AHL. Palmieri going on the injured reserve opens one spot. So essentially, yes, you are battling for one spot, assuming that Julian Gauthier, which I believe he will be on the roster, he signed a one-way deal, sticks. So
I mean, one way only it means he's essentially guaranteed an NHL money. He
yes,
can be
but
sent
then
down and then he could be picked up on waivers,
right.
which if if there are players on your roster already within the system that are impressing you, I think you do that. I think you waive him and hopefully no one picks him up. Or I, I can't. Ross Johnson is so aggravating. $1 million, over $1 million. I don't know how you
Yeah,
don't.
1.1.
I don't know how you don't waive him at this point. Even with Matt Martin or Clutterbuck not in the lineup, he's not the answer. I used to think he could be an everyday player in Martin's absence. I no longer think that. In a
Yeah, I
different
mean,
league, in a
there
different time in this league for sure. Not anymore.
yeah, there's nothing, there's nothing to it. Like he doesn't play ever. How many games did he play last year?
If you
Didn't play.
played 10, I'd be surprised.
16.
Wow. I guess it's a long
16
season, but
games.
unless you're playing, who are the tough guys? Like who, and who on the Islanders can't handle themselves or be that player? Lee, I wouldn't. I was going to say I wouldn't necessarily call him a fighter, but he can handle himself. He's a big boy. Fashing probably has. He's not. I don't think he's a fighter for sure or a tough guy, but he'll do what he needs to do. Um, I don't know. Who else do you need? Mayfield will do it.
Walsham will do it.
Yes, he will. I don't think he should, but he will. So
Cizikas will do it. Palmieri
Cizikas
will
will.
do it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
Barzal will do
think
it. Brock Nelson will do it. Like
like do you need?
they're good. They don't need that.
I mean, I don't. I want to believe that fourth line should still be there. I just in this case, when you're talking about roster spots and really filling out the roster in a different way, and possibly putting a Durando, Cizikas, Fashing fourth line together or something like that. I don't think that's where Durando ultimately belongs. But if you want him on the roster every single day and you want to give him ice time in the NHL, um, I don't know. I don't know how you don't. That'd be a really fast fourth line that would play aggressively and really rag the puck. I think they would own that puck. To borrow a term from an old coach of mine, they would own the puck. It would be in the offensive zone. They would give a lot of speed to that bottom half of the roster. So it's interesting how I think it's interesting that there are a lot of options on how this can play out. There usually isn't this much intrigue, and it may not be as exciting as we think. I think what you said is ultimately what will happen. Um, so I don't really know what the right answer is. I think it can go any number of ways. Again, I think what's concerning for me right now is that Gauthier, there's nothing. I don't know how anyone can have an opinion on whether or not he should make the team or not. Or if he does, I don't know how you would even know if that was a right move or not, because I haven't seen much of anything about him.
Yeah, I mean the thing is, I don't know how much of a chance he's been given to show what he's got at the moment. Right, he's playing tonight with Iskakov, Cizikas, and he's the right winger on that second line. So We'll see what transpires after tonight. I don't really know what the lines were in the first preseason game. I was working. It was he wasn't in the lineup. So, this is really his first shot in game action to show what he's made of. I will say this though, Alan Furing tweeted out something interesting about Gauthier today. It was I knew he was fast, but this is a neat stat. NHL top 5 for most 22-mile-per-hour bursts last season. Number 1, Connor McDavid. Number 2, Nathan McKinnon. Number 3, Braden Point. Number 4, Julian Gauthier. He did it 36 times. He hit 22 miles per hour or more.
Wow.
In 57 games last year.
The Islanders do need to get faster, and I don't think those kinds of attributes are something that shouldn't be considered when building out the roster. And I think it's another reason to have a guy like Durando around. Cizikas Fashing isn't fast. He looks like he's trying so hard though. He's a lot of effort there. So effort and speed, or effort per 60, as maybe some people would joke. But I think I think that's something on the roster that the Islanders, they're not going to get younger all of a sudden this season. But if they can add some speed, I think that could be really important. Going back to Palmieri for a second,
Sure.
any concerns there? We're kind of talking about him possibly going on the IR.
Yeah.
He was out for quite a bit last season. He did come back, and I thought he played really well in his first game back. Although he did get hit right away. Was that against the Coyotes? I can't remember.
Yeah, I can't remember.
I remember he got hit pretty good high. Is there a concern there? I haven't heard a whole lot other than he's still not here.
Yeah, I think, typical Islanders, Lou Lamoriello being Lou Lamoriello, keeping it secretive. Nobody knows what the ailment is. Nobody knows what's bothering Kyle Palmieri. But fact of the matter is that he is 32 years old. He was out multiple times last season. And it's already looking like he could be an injury candidate this year. So yeah, there's definitely concerns there because, like you said, well said too, he was great when he was in the lineup last year, but when he's not in the lineup, it's almost like there's something missing. So, you hope that, like you said earlier, if there is a candidate to replace him, and the most likely style for style replacement might be DeFore. Maybe it's Holmstrom.
I think if Wahlstrom gets put in that
Maybe
spot,
right. Well,
and then
maybe it's Walsh that moves
a
up.
third line spot open next to Lee and Pajot, in
Yeah.
which case that's where I think Dufour can fit in pretty nicely. If it was going to be Wahlstrom anyway, right? If that's kind of what was the plan, that to me makes a ton of sense. Unless I don't know, Duranto's a left winger, Holmstrom's a right winger. This is according to Cap Friendly. So it's possible for Holmstrom to be there if they don't have the roster spot. But if Palmieri's out, you do open up at least one more. You can try one or two of them there to see what's going to stick.
Yeah.
Honestly, it would, for me, if Durando plays as off wing, it'd be between Durando and Dufour, frankly. I'd rather have that speed. Lee's no slouch, but he's not Pajot or Durando. And I think, again, adding some speed to your bottom six is important. And I keep forgetting Hudson Fashing, who we started the show saying that, he's finally, so I keep forgetting that too. That is he not on the Cat Friendly thing? I don't know what I do not know what I'm missing.
Fashing? Yeah, he's there. He's at the bottom.
Yeah, I have no idea how they're going to make this work. I'm very curious what the opening night roster is, with or without Palmieri. I honestly can't envision it because every time we have this, I don't know where Wahlstrom fits in other than on the first line. So that's why it's curious to me thinking about Is it Holmstrom or it could be Durando? I almost think there's no shot of that. It has to be somebody, a main guy on the roster. It doesn't mean that they don't make the roster, but someone has to come out for that to work. And even if Palmieri's out, I don't know that they throw somebody like that just on the first line right away. Rather, I don't think they should do that. They did have Holmstrom there way too much, but they had a lot of young guys there that didn't make an impact and couldn't keep up, whether mentally or physically on that line. So I'm not really sure how that's going to shake out.
Yeah.
It might wind up being Lee back up there, or Wahlstrom, and then they figure out the third line if Palmieri is not available. But I don't see how a Durando or something, unless you, I think the question would be who's out. If Palmieri's out, Wahlstrom looks good on that second line. Perfect. Hudson Fashing's on that third line still, next to Lee and Peugeot. You have your fourth line. You have the second line. So you're just essentially filling that top winger spot still. I don't know. I don't know how you do it. Unless you just throw Wahlstrom there and push Fashing up one, push Wahlstrom up one, or two. Yeah, I don't know how. Is Fashing not an everyday player? Something has to be up with that fourth line. We're really, really stretching this out. I think we're just going in circles here, but it's very confusing.
No, for sure. And the other thing I think too is I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that eventually Walsham could be on that first line with Horvat and Barzal in the left wing spot. I know he's a right winger, but it could happen. It could work.
Yeah, I'm trying to write it out right now because it's been confusing to me otherwise. What number is Fashing? 20?
20.
No, 20. And then so extras are, well, I cannot remember anyone's number. What the hell number is Wahlstrom? This is a terrible podcast,
26.
by the way. 26. And then Durando, Holmstrom, Rondo. Yeah, so if you have your fourth line, you have 27, 44, 20. Engvall, Nelson, Palmieri. X, Horvat, Barzal. You could put Wahlstrom there on the first line. Any one of Wahlstrom, Holmstrom, Durando. Fine. If Palmieri's out, that opens up a spot. Fine. Let's call that. Who would you put there? Palmieri's out. You have two.
Wahlstrom.
Now you have two options. Okay, so then to me, Wahlstrom goes on that first line.
Okay.
All right, so Wahlstrom on the second line as you see it. Who's on the first line then? It's Durando or Holmstrom. Or Gauthier for that matter. Who even knows?
Yeah. I mean, you can. It depends for the rest of the preseason who wins that spot, right? So you could just put Durando / Holmstrom for now.
Yeah, that seems crazy to me.
Or Lee goes back up there, and everyone slides down a spot in the depth chart.
Yeah, then Holmstrom or Durando with Peugeot and Fashing makes more sense.
Right.
And I've kind of maintained that Lee's not a bad option on that first line to start anyway. I think they're trying to avoid that. They want to have speed and then have some more stability in their bottom six, and Lee definitely provides that. Especially next to Peugeot, that's a safe with Fashing. That's a very safe third line. I think a quite good one, as a matter of fact. It's funny. It's like they have all these options, but none of them sound particularly good,
Well,
right?
and that's the thing. So like, you know, it's been a little while since the Islanders have had a guy come out of nowhere and just pop. Um, if there was ever a time, it's this year. They really need that. Um, we haven't even I don't even know if this is in the notes that you wrote down. And it's a bit of a different spectrum because um he's on the blue line, but there's been a lot of conversation about how good Isaiah George looks and some question as to whether or not is he actually going to be sent back to juniors? Does he have, NHL potential right now? So that's part of the conversation. There's also the
Well,
factor that we
let's
didn't talk about this forward either. Matthew Maggio came into camp and said right away, "I'm not looking to make the Bridgeport Islanders." So,
stick
listen,
on
it's
George for just 1 second.
sure
Did he on the depth chart? Did he jump Bolduc or Sallow
it's
or
possible, right? With how impressive he's been, and a lot of people have been noticing how good he's been with the on the ice defensively in his own end. He's got good stick on stick defense. He's got good positional awareness where he's limiting his opposition to perimeter chances. He's a good puck mover. He's got good wheels. Like there's just been a lot of positivity surrounding him as a player. I think that the organization has been impressed with, his evolution as a believe 19-year-old. I think that's how young he is. Um, so yeah, I think that there is definitely something there with I'm trying to see how old he is. Isaiah, yeah, 19 years old. I think there's something there with this kid. And, they got him in the fourth round, and a lot of people had said right away, that was a real good value pick because a lot of people had faith in this kid as a player. Thought that maybe he should have been chosen earlier in the draft when he was drafted a year ago. And now all of a sudden he comes to NHL camp and everybody can't stop talking about how good Isaiah George has been. So um, I wouldn't be personally, I've seen the skill sets. I'm more impressed with what I see in Isaiah George than I am with Samuel Bolduc. I'm more impressed with an Isaiah George than I am with a Robin Salo. I think he's more consistent. I think he's got more, you look at certain players and you say, oh, he's got it, right? And then you look at other players and you're like, okay, he shows potential, but can he do it consistently?
so
There
is
is
the question
there's
about that he winds up sticking around the team as a seventh defenseman? Um, they burn a couple games of the 9 that he's eligible for, and then make a decision.
Yeah, I think that's possible.
And I think that's the right move because he's not more expensive than those other players, and you
No,
need somebody. It's been a while since the Islanders have done that with the defenseman with this much promise since probably Noah Dobson. There was some of that around Robin Salo and Bolduc, but
for complete clarity purposes here, he's 70 grand more expensive than Bulldog. He is 55 grand more expensive than Aho against the cap.
well, we've kind of missed the defense in most of this. I think we know it. Pelech, Pulak, Dobson, Mayfield, Romanov. Um, so there's one more spot. I imagine that's going to Sebastian Aho. I did see some discourse about whether or not he's even NHL ready somehow. I thought that he would have dispelled that. I don't know that he played well all the time, but I thought well enough. And given what the other options are, it's fine. He's got the most NHL experience out of anyone that I didn't name ahead of him there. So I think we're in a similar spot as we were last season heading in, really not knowing what those pairings are going to be. The second and third pairings are going to be. They're going to split up, and I think Pelech and Pulak too. They might not be together. Later on, they certainly weren't. They experimented not being together. So there's a 7th D spot right now on Cap Friendly anyway. It's Bolduc, but I'd be interested to have somebody around like Isaiah George and get him some of that day-to-day NHL experience.
Right.
I have a hard time believing he'll just be there for the season and they'll burn that year unless they really think he can contribute. But he's got 9 games to make that case. And if he's playing well enough, I think that's fine. They have to find a time to get him in the lineup, and I think that would be because somebody's making a mistake, and that somebody would be Aho. So if they're seeing Aho get exposed a little bit, and they need to make some kind of change, having that kind of player around does help. And long term, you need to decide: is it Isaiah George? Up to game 9. Is it Isaiah George or is it Bolduc or Salo that are going to replace him? And frankly, for what we know now, and it's a fresh season, so I'll wipe the slate clean. They definitely have some work to do on that front. I don't think they just go in there and just because they've been around, they're automatically one of those players to replace Aho or just be the 7th defenseman. So that will definitely be interesting. And I like I said, I think we skipped over the D a little bit. So much of that is known, so it's not really much of a question. We luckily have had a lot of these players for a long time, save for Romanov, and Aho has been around, but not on the NHL roster. But definitely, I'm gonna hold you to that. I think it's interesting. I think I'm on board with it. Hopefully, he can do it. I think that's exciting. We there's actually room to have a good rookie around. And you can't really do it in the forward group, or it's definitely a little tougher there. So to be able to do it on the back end is fantastic.
On the other, going back to the offense real quick
and
though,
Maggio,
we
you
didn't
were
even
following the
right. So we didn't talk
there.
about Maggio. He's possibly the Islanders' best forward prospect. I think right now it is DeFore, but Maggio shows some real potential. Obviously, leading the OHL in scoring, 54 goals in 66 games last year. And he did all of that on his own, right? Shane Wright, the NHL's top prospect at the time, was traded to the Spitfires at some point, but he didn't even play with Maggio. So, and this is what Lambert had to say about him after the first preseason game that he got in. He was hurt in the game, but he wound up staying in, and
there's a knee on knee with Trocheck, I believe.
yes, and a lot of the talk about Maggio was his Warriors mentality, and then following the game, Lambert had said he works, he competes, he wants the puck, he'll go to the net, and he can clearly withstand some physicality. So, according to Cap Friendly, he stands at 5'11", 185 pounds. The weight is pretty good. He could it be taller? Yeah, sure, why not? But the league is trending toward smaller players being able to withstand physicality because it's not as much. And he's the type of player who, if his wheels are good enough, maybe he can get around it. So I've been seeing a lot of that coming from these smaller, faster guys being able to get around the physicality. So they might have something in Maggio too. It's funny that we didn't even talk about potentially the Islanders' best offensive prospect because a couple of the other ones are actually playing really well. So, look, I think the Islanders have options right now, and what I said does ring true. It's been a while since a prospect in the Islander system has popped. Everyone thought it was going to be Ratu, right? He left for in the trade for DeFore, right? So now who's in the system that is going to surprise us and take the mantle of the best prospect in the system and run with it and earn some NHL minutes, right? Iskakov could do it if he puts his nose to the grind. DeFore could do it if he puts his nose to the grind. Holmstrom could do it. Maggio could do it, right? There is potential there. I know there's a lot of conversation about how weak the Islanders prospect pool is, but these guys, at least this year, have come into camp and are making some noise. So
I think what's important with that kind of comment, and I think we've said something along these lines before, is that sure, the Islanders' prospects can be thin, but what they do have is good. And I think more importantly, it's not like they have a ton of for sale signs hanging on spots. It'd be different if they really needed a bunch, 2 or 3 middle six guys. They're really not in that position. They have a lot of them locked up. And eventually, as you've said in, multiple seasons of this podcast, that eventually some of those players are going to get knocked down. Lee is the first casualty being pushed down in the lineup. Eventually you'll find others as they get a little bit older. But for now, there really aren't spots available. Ideally, that first line spot is not available to one of these players either. Hopefully it's Wahlstrom or something, and something just clicks with the players that are around. Or X factor, Lou makes a trade at some point. Fat chance. Like I said, we're not even going to discuss it until after it happens, if it ever happens. So we're in a difficult position as a franchise because it's not like you can put one of these prospects in a spot. So there's a beauty and a curse to that. It means when they're up for contract, it's going to be really tough to retain some of them because you do need those cheaper players lower in your lineup to make an impact on your roster kind of right away. But there really isn't a spot for them. There's only one. And that's a maybe. I like we were talking about before, unless Palmieri is out, there's really not a spot. So it's going to be interesting to see what Lambert does. So I understand that kind of comment from people outside of the organization, but I don't know how much water it holds. That's kind of from my perspective anyway.
Natsman Hockey Podcast is brought to you by DraftKings. We're back with another week of football, and DraftKings Sportsbook is keeping us in on all the NFL action with great offers every single game day. New customers can bet just $5 and get $200 instantly in bonus bets. Just throw $5 down on any of this week's epic matchups to walk away an instant winner. DraftKings isn't stopping there either. All customers can take advantage of 2 new offers every game day this September. Football's more fun when you're in on the action, so download the app now and sign up with code THPN. New customers can bet just $5 to get $200 instantly in bonus bets. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL, with code THPN. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.1800gambler.net. In New York, call 877-8-HOPENY or text HOPE New York 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort, licensee partner Golden Nugget Lake Charles. 21 plus age varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. See sportsbook.draftkings.com/football terms for eligibility, terms and responsible gaming resources. Bonus bets expire 7 days after issuance. Eligibility and deposit restrictions apply.
You want to go into some season previews because I thought they were really bad, frankly. Specifically the Athletic, and we don't, and I like those writers too, which is annoying. I just don't, for all the attention I wish the Islanders got when they do get it, it's usually bad. It's not good attention, and I don't think there's any attention to detail in some of these. Did you have a chance to look at was it Dom Decision, Shayna Goldman, and Sean Gentili had a season preview about the Islanders?
The season preview, yeah, I looked at it briefly.
What did you think about that? Because I have some thoughts.
I think it's the same it's been. The article started with if you don't if at first you don't succeed, try again. The narrative is constantly run it back, but I see it differently. I don't know that they're necessarily running it back, right? A lot of the same personnel is there, but you have to factor in a full year of Horvat. You have to factor in a full year of Engbal, right? That's potentially pretty important, right? Oliver Wahlstrom missed most of last year. pretty significant, right? And that I've been talking about how much of a different mindset he's been talking about coming into this season, and how the injury was a blessing in disguise, and he feels um that he's got a different mentality coming into this year, and he thinks it's going to benefit him. Um y- you know the fact of the matter is, I think those are some major changes. A full year of Horvat, who looks way more comfortable in the preseason. He's pretty much kind of scoring at will and doing some, pretty interesting stuff, creative stuff, I'll say, in order to put the puck in the net. Engvall, just that if he's just as consistent as he was with the Islanders last season, that's something they didn't have for the majority of the year. So,
Right.
and then we'll see what Wallstrom brings. He's got to prove it still, but there's a lot to be excited about there. And again, kind of bring over what we said earlier in the episode. If one of these kids pops, suddenly now that's four pieces that's in your lineup that you didn't have for the majority of last season.
Yeah,
So
I definitely agree with that. It, it put more bluntly, and perhaps in less nice terms, I thought it was bullshit. And exactly
yeah,
to the reasons that you said. I I saw some jokes, thanks to Dan and Mike of Lighthouse, always providing the levity kind of after that came out. But in all seriousness, I didn't want to look at it after I saw those comments, and then I did ahead of the show. And in the beginning, it says, "quote The Islanders have a decent shot of making the playoffs, and it would be a hard out if they did." I'm an Islander fan. That narrative, it's like they didn't watch anything about the Islanders. They just looked at the numbers and who they added and this and that, and then didn't actually do any research. They just read a bunch of stuff and looked at what the stats were and the analytics and wrote this piece. Because if you watched their out against Carolina, that was embarrassingly bad. That was not a hard out. So that narrative has really been kind of carried over from a couple of years ago. And this is the year they need to prove that it is the right narrative. But based on the last 2 years, I don't know that that's right. And it really leads me to believe that they didn't pay attention. And I like all these writers. I have to say, I typically like their work, but this seemed tough to me. And we've even had Shane on the show, and she's very insightful and knows her shit
yeah.
about the Islanders for the most part. So I'm a little surprised because it just didn't seem like there was actually any depth there. And it, I was disappointed. I don't know that I'm surprised, but I'm disappointed in what they're saying. I guess how they're saying it, because having said all of that, and perhaps the funniest part is, or the irony, I don't agree with how they got there, but I don't disagree with the conclusion where essentially they're a bubble team. Unless they prove otherwise. And to your point, there's been a lot of missing pieces. They need to implement that though. Right? You can only kind of go on what you know, and perhaps that was their point, in which I apologize. But as I see it, they have a lot to prove.
What I wonder about, when there is when a lot of the writers around the league, both national or maybe closer, East Coast writers that see the Islanders often, when they say that they're a tough out, I don't always think that they mean they're going to be hard to beat. I think maybe there is, half of that population at least thinking, or saying that in the sense of, you can beat them on the score sheet, but they're going to beat the shit out of you. And maybe that's what, some of
That's
that
possible.
narrative is. Um,
That's possible.
so I fully understand your thinking. In Carolina mopped the floor with the Islanders last postseason, but it wasn't easy to get through because the Islanders put up a tough fight and physically, right? So maybe there's a little bit of that um, in that sentiment.
Yeah, I can understand that. I think for the most part, I think it just lacked, for all the information, it lacked nuance and kind of understanding things. Exactly to all your points. Having a full, healthy roster and then having a full season of Barzal and Horvat, not having Barzal return from injury and not be
Yeah,
himself as well. So I think there's a lot
and
to it, and I think that's important nuance.
yeah, and that's something that actually Matt Martin even said. Matt Martin said in this preseason, you know, we know that the narrative is we ran it back. He goes, but you have to understand that we see it completely differently. Like getting a full year of a settled in Horvat and a settled in Pierre Engbal and a healthy Oliver Wallstrom. Though that's pretty much word for word what Matt Martin said. He goes, those are our additions. Like we're going to be a different team this year.
Yeah, Engvall too. Engvall too. I think that's
Yeah,
I don't know if you said that earlier as well. I think
yeah,
that's also a really good point to make here. I I don't put too much stock in it, much like you shouldn't put stock in the preseason as a whole. But um, it just annoyed me. I thought it was worth at least bringing up. But I appreciate you bringing me down to earth. We switch roles maybe a little bit there. We do that occasionally. But to the preseason, really just going off of what we've seen in camp, anything additional, and the first game, and then I'm sure you're watching live here as I am.
yeah.
Um, they lost the Rangers on Tuesday night. First of all, I woke up today. I thought it was Thursday. I was very disappointed to find out it was not. Um, and then I thought this game against the Rangers was on Monday. I don't know where my head's at. Apparently, I don't know the days of the week. Or maybe I was asleep for Tuesday. I'm not entirely sure. What did you think of the game against the Rangers?
When it comes to, you know, preseason games, I don't really take too much stock in the outcomes. I take more stock in how individual players performed. So them losing, going down 3-0 quick really didn't say much to me, right? Just quickly taking a look at the score sheet. Varlamov started, Skarek, relieved them. But who played that were the regulars, right? It was Pulock, Clutterbuck, Engvall. I guess you can consider Fashing a regular. Mayfield, Lee, Nelson, Pajot, and that's it. Everyone else was, new or a prospect, right? But look at who did get on the board. William Defoe scored his first, you know, preseason NHL goal, assisted by Durando and Maggio. That's
Yeah, the future, right?
completely right. That's exactly what I was going to say. It's completely the future right there. Followed up with another goal or another point for Durando. Right, he scored a goal later in the game from Fashing and Jackson Cates, who's on PTO. That's what I look at. Right, Jacob Skarek made 6 saves on 6 shots. Right, he didn't have a full period. Even he played 17 minutes because then they wound up pulling the goaltender. But um, those little storylines within the game you look at and you say, okay, the young guys showed up and got us on the board, right? And the good thing about DeFore's goal was that it was on the power play, right? What was one of the biggest things that the Islanders missed last year? Power play goals. He's a shoot first guy, and I watched the goal, right? It was a bouncing puck that he found and didn't hesitate. As soon as it landed on his stick, it was in the back of the net. So great to see. Durando had, I believe, he had a tap in. Shows his positional awareness. Look, 3 quick goals for the Rangers, 3 in 3 minutes. Kako scored, Pitlick scored, Kreider scored. Those are 3 veteran guys who know how to put the puck in the back of the net in the regular season. Mind you, the preseason against the B squad. So I don't take too much stock in it. I think that no one should be hitting the panic button for losing a 4-2 game in the preseason. Because if that was the case, then Canucks fans should be pulling their hair out for losing 10-0 the other night. So
Yeah, that was a little surprised seeing that. I haven't seen that in the preseason in some time. And to your point about not hitting the panic button, I don't remember a time where we continued to talk about something that happened in the preseason for the remainder of the season, or in previous years for that matter.
no.
It's all about, maybe that's the start, and we saw some flashes, and they ultimately made the roster, or they came back later in the season and made the roster from junior, or um, from the AHL or something like that. But typically it's forgotten pretty quickly. There's
Yeah.
nothing all that exciting most of the time, other than the I'm sorry, not who was the goal from the guy on the Coyotes in the Australian game against the
Oh,
Kings?
Logan Cooley.
Logan Cooley. Good grief, that was amazing.
Yeah, it was a nice
So
goal.
outside of that, which unfortunately didn't count for much, other than a highlight for the season, probably the best goal you'll see all year. Um, you're not going to talk about it. And even that, say Durando did that, I don't know that helps him make the roster. I think it's just a great goal. He's got to put a lot together around that to make the roster, just as an example. So I think, as you said, there's not really much to take away. Although I'll say that I'm watching this game and seeing Salo play, and I know we kind of spoke about the defense a little earlier. He has these flashes where he's just such a smooth skater with the puck, and he almost looks like a smaller Pellick in the way that he's able to handle the puck and distribute it. And it gives me a little hope that he can actually put it all together, and help round out the defense. Again, we've said this multiple times over the years. The Islanders have done a good job kind of cultivating these defenders. Aho is fine, but if they can put another player there that's a little more rounded out and not one dimensional, like someone like Salo, that'd be amazing.
Man, the more I cover the game and the more I watch it, closely from um whether it be the press box or ringside, at a practice or something like that, I'm more and more convinced that the game of hockey is 90% mentality, 10% skill. I think they all have it. Every single player. If you make the National Hockey League, you have the skill. It's about how much confidence do you have applying that skill on the ice against opponents who are just as good as you. For Robin Salo, you're absolutely right. Like there are times where I think he looks fantastic, and then there are times where I sit there and I say, "What the fuck was that?" Um, and I think that's completely between the ears. And listen, he's young. You know, it's funny because you could have a 20-year NHL career and retire by age 40, but you have such a little. Even though 20 years is a decently long time, you have such a small window to figure it out. And if you don't figure it out, your window is even smaller. Um, so we're talking about how old is Robin Salo? Talking about a 24-year-old. When I was 24 years old, I didn't even know what I wanted to do in my life. So to be in the National Hockey League or in even the American Hockey League and figure it out, like that's not easy to do. And um he may never do it. He may do it this year. Who knows? Um, but I think he has all the skill in the world. I think he has all the potential in the world. It's just a matter of having that confidence to apply that on the ice. I'm watching it now
Yeah,
with a player.
there's a good sequence. He broke the puck out great.
Yeah.
It was a good first look. He jumps into play. would have preferred getting something towards the net instead of kind of fading off to the right side there. But it's still a decent look. So
Yeah.
there's something there.
I'm watching it
He
now with a player on the Devils. Last year came into camp, Kevin Ball. Last year came into camp and talked about how he worked with a mental coach all summer, and he was, less concentrated on, his physical training and more concentrated on his mental training. And throughout the year, he continued to increase his role and show, prove himself, and, you know, eventually became an everyday NHLer. The Devils lost a couple of big names in free agency or via trade on the blue line, and he is expected to step up. And he's been possibly the Devils' best player in all of training camp in the preseason. I'm just every day continually impressed with this player. And I talked to him again a couple of days ago, and I said, "What was it that you did this summer that has translated so well on the ice?" And he goes, "I just continued to do what I did last summer and just really work on my mental health and the way I think the game, and it's really helped me, take my game to the next level." So I'm continually convinced that it's a complete. The whole game is just 90% between the ears, 10% on the ice.
I I think that's right. You can definitely get in your own head, and if you're thinking a little bit more clearly, and you can kind of gain some confidence that way, knowing that you're doing the right things, and that it'll eventually add up. I think that's a pretty safe approach, especially for younger players. So yeah, hopefully Salo can kind of put that together. He's on the power play right now with, or he was for the Islanders in this game, and our friend Gauthier was on a line with Horvat and Barzal on that power play. I don't know that means a whole lot other than giving it a shot and see what he can do in the
You
offensive
hit the
zone. But
post.
yeah, so I think that's, again, we're not taking a whole lot of stock. I think it's just interesting, kind of how that's kind
The
of add up.
Islanders are running a nice power play right now.
And
I'm seeing a lot.
that was
Yep.
Wallstrom on the distribution
Yep.
from the
On the
from
bumper.
the on the bumper, on the low bumper spot, not
The
in
low
not
bumper.
the high. Horvat was in the middle
I
bumper
really
spot there.
like what I'm seeing here. They got Iskakov on the far wall. They have Wallstrom in the low bumper, Horvat in between the hashes,
Wallstrom's got to
and
get to the front there.
Barzell's in the trigger spot, which is interesting. He looks like he's shooting more. A lot of good movement there.
Yeah,
And
I like to see
Lane
Wallstrom
Lambert,
fight his way there a little bit quicker to get in
yeah,
front of the goalie's
sure.
eyes. But
But Lane Lambert was vocal about, I'm going to be more involved in the power play. Typically, head coaches defer that to the associate coach and let them run special teams. But he said he's going to be more involved. So we'll see if the Islanders can have a less of a boring power play this year, and activate some puck movement, because it was a lot of stand there, wait for the perfect lane to open, and wait and see, which often you never saw anything.
yeah, yeah, the power play's gotta.
Go chase scores.
Oh, your feed is a few seconds ahead of mine apparently.
I apologize, but he does,
Yeah,
and
picks up a loose puck there on the after a bad clearing attempt and a failed shot on goal. And yeah, that's good. Right place at the right time. It's something you want to see from somebody that's going to help round out your roster. So I like seeing that. I want to end with two questions here as
hit
we're
me
in the
with it.
midst of the. So one's more of a quiz question. The other one is just your thoughts. Um, where and we had I did ask somebody did ask us on Twitter, and I forgot to pull it up, so I'm going to do that right now. And this is me stalling, but I'll ask you, how many points do you think the Islanders end the season with? Are they a bubble team, or are they firmly in? And I may have asked this maybe in a previous episode, but probably bears repeating.
I don't think they're better than the Devils or the Hurricanes. I don't think they're better. I shouldn't say that. I don't think they're worse than anyone else. I'm not buying what the Rangers are putting on the ice this year. I know they got Wheeler for a considerable discount, but they're betting a lot on Lafreniere and Kako to take another step forward. A couple of guys who first and second round, first and second overall picks that haven't quite panned out the way they want them to. I don't think that they're also the fastest team in order to, and I know the Islanders aren't either, but they play a different system. I don't think that the Rangers are the fastest team in to keep up with the rest of the NHL. So I'll go with, you know, I could see them between 95 and 100 points, the Islanders.
Wow. So John Filippelli said 98 points and sixth place
Yeah.
is his prediction. That's high. I kind of have them in the mid to low 90s, kind of
You have
getting in
to
there in maybe the seventh spot. But
remember they potentially have the best goaltender in the NHL, and he could just carry you there.
I mean, as simple as it sounds and as ridiculous as it sounds, they just have to score one more goal than the other team. They don't need to score a lot. As long as the goaltender can keep them in it, they're in pretty much every single game. And it's a little bit of a cheat code. And I think if alone the goalie and Horvat and Barzal can just carry this team, if Nelson can continue to do what he's doing and all of that, I don't want to say that the possibilities are endless. I think the Islanders are better than a fading Washington. The Pittsburgh Penguins are a giant question mark, although they've added, I can't remember exactly who.
Eric Carlson. Riley Smith.
Yeah, all right. So they've made some, good contributions there, but yeah, I think to your point is who are they actually better than? I think they maintain that fourth spot to me in competition with the Penguins.
I
At
think
least
it's
something like that.
In no particular order. I think it's the Hurricanes and the Devils, and then a mushy middle.
Yeah, I think the Islanders, Penguins, and even the Rangers, who they can't fall off that much from a year ago, remains to be seen. But I think they round out that mushy middle of the Metro Division. The other question is about Corey Schneider, who retired officially.
Yes, he did.
I saw how many games he played, and I was very surprised. I wanted to ask you if you knew how many NHL games Corey Schneider played.
Yeah, I just wrote this. 410.
He was around more consistently since 2010-11.
Yeah, 13 NHL seasons, but the first two were like 10 games combined.
Yeah, that's why I say starting in 10-11 with 2025. It's crazy. I think he was splitting time with Luongo. They won
the Jennings that year.
Yeah, and God, did he just have such good numbers through 15-16? Wow, was he just one of the best goalies even after he got to the Devils? It 2013-14, he had a 197 921 save percentage. That is insane.
Yeah, he was considered the best goaltender since Martin Brodeur in his time with New Jersey.
He had 2 seasons. Now, granted, the first one, he was 33 games. He had a 196 and a 937. And then the 197 921. So twice in his career, he was able to be below 2 goals against the game. But over a 920 for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 seasons in a row. That's about as dominant of a goalie as there was in that time period.
Yeah, man, injuries are a bitch, and he certainly had plenty of those to deal with.
Yeah, it is crazy. He never won a ton of games.
No, he never played a lot of games though. He played 1 year. He played 69 games for the Devils, but everything else was, you know,
30s, 40s.
30s, 40s. Right? He had out of 13 NHL seasons, he had 1, 2, 3 that were 60 or more. Everything else was no, I'm sorry. He had 1, 2 that were 60 or more. So all right, 358 or more. Everything else was 40, 45, 30, 33, 25. Right? 26, 13, 1.
Yeah, that's so. Yeah, I saw that stat. And I thought it was crazy.
Yeah, he was excellent in his peak. But unfortunately, injuries really derailed how great he could have been.
Yeah. So I want to end it on that. Any of the closing thoughts, or you're good to go?
No, congratulations to Corey Snyder on a awesome career. I hope that he goes to on TV because I actually really did like the few segments he did before. So remember those couple of years between the Devils and the Islanders, he didn't retire, but he was on TV, and then the Islanders wound up signing him. So he was pretty good. I liked what I heard. So I think that's of interest to him in the future, and I would like to see it.
Same. I definitely enjoyed those as well.
I'm looking forward to next week's episode for the sole fact that we can really reflect on this episode and you know, everything we talked about as far as, you know, who's going to be where, because there's definitely going to be more answers by this time next week.
All right, let's do our best. We'll have to rewatch this episode because I'm sure I'll forget by next week. But we'll make sure to have we'll leave our notes together and we'll comment on our comments and add to it to see if anything changed and hopefully you're right and we have a few more answers here. Let's end it though. Please rate, review, subscribe wherever you listen to or watch the show. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Threads, and YouTube at Nesman Hockey. You can find James' work at New Jersey Hockey Now and the Fourth Period, and make sure to check out Isles Fix, especially as the season gets started. Straight to your inbox every morning, a good little wrap up of what's going on and keeping you up to date in Isles country. And as the Islanders continue to take on the Philadelphia Flyers, James, bring us home.
Until next time, all, let's go Islanders.